Good morning, everyone. A huge crowd gathering here today. So, yesterday I arrived at the airport and the airline company decided not to provide me with the luggage, but I bought quickly a jacket, at least to be a bit decent here. Well, good morning. Yes, as said, I'm of EIT Urban Mobility, but before talking about my company and my keynote, I would like to thank Transport Innovation Association for organizing this great event. It is the second time in 2 weeks that I'm here in your beautiful city. 2 weeks ago with the Urban Mobility Days and today here. Like us, Transport Innovation Association, they recognize the potential of bringing partners together, industry, academia, research and the public sector, and that all to drive innovation. And what are we doing here today is exactly that. Look at this. Look at this crowd. Look left, right, look back, look forward. A lot of people from those ecosystem players. For those who may not know us, EIT Urban Mobility, we are part of EIT, that is the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, and EIT is a body of the European Union. They have several knowledge and innovation communities, of which urban mobility is one of them. Our mission is to drive the sustainable mobility transition in Europe and to create more and better livable spaces. We have the largest innovation ecosystem in Europe, and we are also the most active investor in new mobility solutions in European cities. The keynote is already introduced about climate targets and how can we set climate targets in our advantage for competitiveness in Europe. The climate clock is ticking. According to the IPCC, by 2030, global emissions would need to be reduced by 43% compared to 2019. And that is just to ensure a maximum increase of 1.5 degrees. The EU has committed to a net reduction of at least 55% by 2030 compared to 1990. Be prepared. I have 13 pieces of paper, but I tried to make it a bit more interactive. Despite these commitments, emissions in some sectors are stagnant or even increasing. Transport is the only major sector of the economy where emissions have not, hear well, not decreased since 1990. This climate challenge is set against the backdrop of global uncertainty and geopolitical tension. War is at Europe's doorstep. Europe's relationship with old allies has never been more precarious. The US withdrawal from its climate commitments has also cast uncertainty over the global cooperation to meet climate targets. Meanwhile, China is pursuing an offensive strategy by massively subsidizing its green industries, enabling Chinese automotive players to flood the international market with low-cost electric vehicles. Last year, the Draghi report warned that the delay in investment in key transition sectors will lead to a risk of loss of industrial attractiveness and strategic dependence if Europe does not react. This is particularly true for the transport sector, which is responsible for nearly a quarter of Europe's greenhouse gas emissions. With road transport, mainly cars and trucks, making up to 70% of the transport emissions. At the same time, the automotive industry is a large industry, 7% of the EU GDP, with 13.8 million direct and indirect jobs across the bloc. Since 2017, European automakers have lost more than 13% in its market share. Weakened by aggressive foreign competition, dependence on critical metals, and the high cost associated with the transition to electric vehicles. The central question here is, can Europe turn its climate challenge into a source of competitive advantage? I believe we can. And the sustainable urban mobility transition will be at the heart of it. Let me answer the question through the EU's competitive compass, the plan to reignite Europe's competitiveness. This compass outlines 3 transformational imperatives to boost competitiveness. First, closing the innovation gap. Second, decarbonizing our economy. And third, reducing our dependencies. First one, closing the innovation gap. Europe's mobility innovation landscape remains strong, but needs renewed momentum. Europe continues to lead global in mobility innovation, accounting for 40% of all mobility investment transactions in 2024, well ahead of Asia and the United States. Despite a 30% correction in venture funding after the COVID period, mobility has remained one of Europe's top 5 most funded sectors for over a decade now. Investors are not withdrawing. They are focusing on viability and backing startups with strong business models and the ability to reach profitability faster. Cities are the engine, as already mentioned before, and are the enabler of Europe's mobility innovation. Cities are the hubs of innovation, attracting talent and creativity. In mobility, cities are also the customers of the solutions. 63% of mobility startups in Europe sell to public institutions. Public procurement represents over 15% of the EU's GDP. Yet, startups and SMEs still face high entry barriers with highly fragmented procurement frameworks across Europe. Cities can also act as living labs by providing real-world testing solutions and ground reality. For cities, this helps to de-risk the solutions they potentially would like to work with in the future. To overcome challenges and barriers, a mobility innovation ecosystem with strong public-private partnerships is a requirement. Vilnius as an example, where the city and its dynamic startup ecosystem are working hand in hand to shape the future of transportation. Vilnius was named the most business-friendly city in Central and Eastern Europe and the Baltics in 2024. The city is also among the 100 European cities committed to becoming climate neutral by 2030 and is named the European Green Capital of 2025. Through UDO, its mobility authority, Vilnius has turned the city into an innovation playground for new ideas and tools. Lithuanian startups have since introduced transport apps, car-sharing platforms, and data-driven mobility solutions designed to ease congestion and shift travel habits. Scaling success story, for example, Trafi, the local company behind Vilnius transport app, is also the company behind Jelby, the hugely popular mass mobility as a service app of Berlin, and has expanded to several other European cities, including Brussels, Munich, and Zurich. Europe needs to be in the driver's seat of innovation, in sectors that will matter tomorrow's economy. Last year, 2024, the top mobility funding rounds were focused on autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles, especially when shared, can address persistent challenges in public transport, such as service gaps, operational inefficiencies, driver shortages, and the lack of coverage in rural and underserved areas. But further advances in testing in autonomous vehicle technology is required to safely deploy large-scale AVs beyond pilot projects and controlled environments. Cities such as Beijing and Shenzhen, China, which EIT and myself visited a couple of weeks ago, played a pivotal role in China's AV success by providing autonomous driving test zones and offering subsidized fast-track permits and partnership to encourage development. In Europe, cities want to shape how autonomous mobility is embedded in our transport systems and not merely be a passive bystander. They require independent, reproducible assessments of AV surface design and to be able to monitor and manage interaction with fixed-line public transport and other users in real time. More broadly, the same principles should govern all urban innovations. In that way, cities can steer the deployment of sustainable outcomes like decarbonization, safety, equity, and accessibility rather than vendor-led rollouts. Besides the innovation gap that I touched upon, let me now touch upon the decarbonizing of our economy. Europe has set out an ambitious framework to become a decarbonized economy by 2050. It must stay at the course towards these targets, including the targets for 2040, as this gives certainty and predictability to both companies and investors. Decarbonization of the automotive sector is highlighted in the competitive compass as critical in ensuring European leadership in future technologies and the clean transition. Historically, the automotive sector has been a driving force of economic growth and industrial development in the EU. We must fully embrace electrification. Slowing down now will only deepen our dependence on shrinking ICE markets, the conventional engine market, while competitors in Asia and the US race ahead. The slowdown in Europe's battery electric vehicle uptake is often pinned on consumers' supposed reluctance to go electric. But 2023-2024 were also tough years for European households, with inflation, volatile electricity prices, and the persistent housing affordability crisis. The early adopter segment, typically the higher income and higher educational household, is close to saturation in the European markets. Increasing the battery electric vehicle uptake hinges on winning over mass market consumers. In fact, survey data consistently indicates that a majority of consumers value the climate benefits of electric vehicles over ICE vehicles and would be open to switching if their concerns like affordability, battery driving range and charging speeds are addressed. Yet to date, there remains a notable mismatch between what cost-conscious mass market consumers are looking for and what is available in the market. Only 25% of the 400+ new car launches expected in Europe over the period 24-28 are small and medium models, which represent an even smaller share of available models than in 2023. Auto-obesity or car bloat, between 2001 and 2022, the average curb weight of cars sold in Europe increased by 21%. More than 60% of EVs sold in China are cheaper than the average petrol car. However, in Europe, EVs remain between 10 to 50% more expensive than their fossil fuel counterpart. If we want electrification to succeed, then smaller, lighter and cheaper electric cars must become the new norm. So I touched upon innovation cap. I touched upon decarbonizing the economy. Now let me talk about redundancies, reducing dependencies. To strengthen Europe's competitiveness, we also need to reduce our dependencies on non-European actors. Road transport accounts for a quarter of total energy consumption in the EU. And more than 93% of energy used in EU transport comes from fossil fuels, mainly from outside of Europe. Electricity only accounts for a fraction of our total transport energy consumption, and mainly for rail. For rail, it is 90%. We need to reduce our oil imports through two things: electrification of road transport and modal shift. Electrification. The potential of electrification spans the entire transport sector, from public transport and freight logistics to private cars and micromobility. Yet most of the supply chain for EV batteries, from critical raw materials to cell manufacturing, remains dominated by non-EU players, which control around 3/4 of the global production. This dependency exposes us to supply chain vulnerabilities at the very moment that batteries are becoming a cornerstone of the Green Deal, grid stability, and industrial competitiveness. To mitigate this, battery circularity in Europe is crucial, so that we can better repair, reuse, and recycle batteries. But while electrification of vehicles is crucial, it will not solve our problems alone. We cannot be successful without also enabling a significant model shift. We need to shift transport towards more sustainable models and modes than private car. And here I think light electric vehicles can play a big part. In cities, e-bikes, e-scooters, e-cargo bikes can meet a substantial part of our urban mobility needs, with smaller batteries and fewer critical raw materials than the electric car. In 2020, the estimated tonnage of light electric vehicle batteries placed on the market was 10 times smaller than that of the electric car batteries. But the number of LEVs sold was almost 3 times higher. And the sale of light electric vehicles in Europe, such as e-bikes, is on an upward trajectory that is only set to continue. We need reliable, basic European data infrastructure, like the Common European Mobility Data Space. And when it comes to cities, a clear local data strategy is a must. This means interoperability by default, privacy and cybersecurity by design. But underpinning all of this, the 3 topics that I addressed, collaboration is key for innovation. No single actor can manage this transition alone. Ecosystems like ours, with EIT Urban Mobility and our partners like Transport Innovation Association, facilitate collaboration between startups and larger companies, between cities and industry, creating a truly European environment where innovation can thrive. Such ecosystems reduce market entry barriers for startups and SMEs and help build trust between the private sector and the public sector. And that's what we need. We need trust. Trust is another crucial component if Europe is to turn the climate transition into a competitive advantage. So let's get started. I am confident that Lithuania, and together with the rest of Europe, that we have the talent, the vision, and the resources to turn our European climate targets into a real global competitive advantage. Thank you very much for having me, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.